Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, and I'm doing a live stream here Saturday. It's for those watching the recording, May 6th, 2023. And I thought, I did a market video relatively recently within the last week or so, but there weren't a lot of new releases that I thought were interesting enough to give first thoughts on. And so given that, I thought, well, let's do something a little fun as maybe an hour-long live stream or so. And that is talking about watch brands that uh, I've been interested in, but I've never actually owned, because we're at the point now at least I am with my watch collecting, that I've owned a lot of different brands, and I still own a number of brands, but there are a lot that have caught my eye over the years, but for whatever reason, I've never pulled the trigger on them. So in terms of the context for this video, it's only going to be brands I've never owned. So whether I've owned them or and sold them, or if I still have them, they're ruled out as companies. And in some of these instances, it's going to be about the brand, and in some of these instances, it's going to be maybe more about a particular watch. That's probably more often the case because there's got to be something that catches my eye. But good morning, Obese Dinner. I guess it's more afternoon time out there in the UK. And yes, coronation time. Very exciting for you all. Probably not so much for me. And good morning, Ken. Glad that you're able to make it to the live stream. So that's really what we're going to talk about. And I put them in the description because, I've got all the tabs loaded already to discuss. We've got, oh gosh, I think something on the order of like 9 companies or so to go through. Maybe about 10 different watches or so. So we'll have a few to go in. Let's see. Yes, and Cloud Ken is one of the 99-cent club members. I looked at renaming it to the 99-cent club to compete with Dollar Shave Club. Unfortunately, it has to go back through YouTube submission review if I rename it. And I was like, I don't know if it's worth it. So I'll just keep calling it the WWD Club and just noting, as is in the chat, that it's 99 cents a month. And there's a link, and you get a bunch of emojis. That's really the only perk. But well, other than I do post questions that sometimes are just for that group to help decide like content and stuff, because hey, if you're paying, I might as well solicit your opinion because you've put some money where your mouth is. So on watch today, this is my Orient Cano, and I got it back on the Barton strap. This is actually I get my first watch. Is it a watch horror story? Not really, because nothing bad happened, but first time ever I had the bracelet detach off a watch was on this watch. And it's my fault. You all might remember I put out a video on regulating this Orient Cano, a couple of weeks ago. I didn't wear the watch after that, but I detached the bracelet on one side in order to gain access to the movement easily so I could, work on the balance. And I apparently did not put the spring bar back into the holes. Probably had it in one hole and almost in another hole. So I was picking up something off the ground, and my watch band came off, and the watch fell. It was about 6 inches onto carpet. So nothing interesting happened other than I was like, oh, I didn't secure this right. Spring bar was fine. I didn't break. It was not put in right. And that's my fault problem. So I did put it back on the bracelet briefly, but now that things are warming up here in Kansas, I prefer the silicone in the heat because bracelets kind of get annoying to me when they get warm. This is the only one I've switched over so far, but sometimes I've got like silicone bands for my Rolex and my Omega. I got who doesn't have a lot of watch straps once you start collecting? So I got a lot of straps, and I tend to prefer silicone to NATO, so I've sort of shifted more that way as I've gotten more experience with what I like and don't like. But let's talk about some brands that have caught my eye for various reasons. So I like them, or I think I like them, or I want to like them. It really depends on the company. But I've never owned any of their watches. Some of these I've gone in and looked at in person, like maybe one of them. Most of these, though, I've never really worked with at all. And yes, hello, Koji. Welcome to the live stream. So let's go ahead and let's get cracking here. So the first company I want to start with is Ball. Now, I've known about Ball for a long time. So this was probably one of the first brands I ever really looked at when I started collecting. And I didn't really consider myself a collector until about 2020. So, heard about this company. so much about it was interesting to me, and that's saying aside the heritage, right? The whole history, the railroad time thing. It's a fascinating story, and y'all have probably already heard it. And if not, there are plenty of other YouTubers who've done a really good job explaining it. You don't need the Dennis Cliff Notes version of it. Long story short, though, and I'll say, and oh, hello from Florida, huh? Well, welcome, Sushi. I'm glad you could make the live stream. So it was tied to the railroad industry, and so they lean on that a little bit. That's why you'll see, like in this example of this Engineer 2, this official RR for railroad standard. But the company's done a lot of interesting things that have kept catching my eye, but I've never bought. So the colorful tritium dials. Here's a look, so you can see kind of like what this one looks like. With you can do colorful superluminova. I've seen it. Some companies will use a couple colors of superluminova, just like we're seeing a couple colors of tritium here. But usually you see things in green or blue in that case, and you see a lot of other colorations. Like here, we've got this green, which again would be pretty standard for loom, but yellow. There's actually a rainbow Engineer 2 that's got all sorts of rainbows worth of colors. So there's that. Good morning, Kevin. Glad you could make the live stream. And so, okay, so that's cool. Like colorations is, fun, a little fun, right? You got the railroad history, cool, regarding that. You got some interesting features like this moon phase. What's this price? The pricing is not too extreme here, I don't think. So it's about $3,000. So that's what that says. And then like 904L steel. I don't know if they do that on all their watches. Some of their watches are 904L steel, though. That's the more corrosive resistant steel that Rolex uses. In fact, Rolex is the only brand I thought used 904L until I saw Ball regularly does it. So there's all that, and the price points are relatively low. In fact, Ball watches seem to flood. I know they do a lot of pre-order where you can get a discount if you pre-order, but regardless of, even though they do that, at least historically, they kind of flooded the market with a bunch of watches, so you could find them gray market real easy at a lot of discounts. And in fact, there was one I almost bought a couple of times until they finally were out of stock. That Joma Shop kept having. It was an older limited, like it was one of the Ducks Unlimited one, not the camouflage one. They had one that was, I think, a lot more tame. But I thought, it'd be an interesting way to try that out. And as Tuna has noted in the chat, again, I've heard so many people speak so highly about Ball watches. So as I said, I almost bought one once. And here's an example of one that I still like. I like a lot of the Engineer 2s in particular. This is just one that's a moon calendar because I don't have a moon phase watch anymore. I had one at one point, but I currently don't own one. And I kind of miss having that complication. It's one of those kind of more romantic complications. That's practicality to me is pretty minimal, but I think it looks good on a dial, even on a sports watch like this. So, but every time I resist on it, it's mostly because of the tritium. So I had a Marathon tritium watch, and it was a nice watch, and I read about this, but it helped actually experiencing it, and that is, despite what you see in these images, tritium is a lot darker than loom. Now, it's consistent because you've got a whole half-life going on. So generally speaking, it dims over years, but you have this consistent level of light, but it's not bright like this. It's a lot less than, it's not like freshly charged loom on any watch you normally think of. And so given that, and that's one of the big highlights for me about Ball, I've never ended up buying, because especially after having the Marathon watch, which was even cheaper than the Balls I was looking at, I was like, the tritium just, I was warned, and that was at the price point. I was fine with it. I've sold that Marathon since anyway, but I was like, I want it to be like bright, and it's just not bright. And that's like the biggest thing about Ball over, like I can find a moon phase with anyone, right? I can, I have a 904L steel watch. I can always, I could say it's easier said than done, right? But I could say I could always get another Rolex and get a high quality 904L that's going to have a super comfortable bracelet. Like, I don't know if Ball's bracelet's going to be, I doubt it will be as good. Most brands are not. In fact, I can't name any brand that's bracelet I liked as much as Rolex. The closest I'd actually come is the butterfly deployant on Zodiac, of all brands, which had its own issues, but not in the bracelet, but in the watch. But we're not here to complain about Zodiac. So So that's sort of it with ball. So that's one that I've thought about for quite a while, and here I am, still unable to pull the trigger. So uh, that's an interesting one, Frederic Constant. I've never handled a Frederic Constant, and honestly, I've not looked much at their watches. So I've seen people bring them up on kind of underrated brands, but it's not a brand I've explored, and maybe that's one I need to do. Maybe I don't even know if I'd put a video together about it, but just something to educate myself, because it's one I do see mentioned a lot. And so, okay, I see Sushi suggesting them in the realms of a moon phase. Okay, and my last moon phase was a Geo, a Glishuta original, which I mean, it was a nice moon trip phase, but like in terms of attractive moon phases, there are a lot of really attractive moon phases. So it doesn't have to be like some German brand or whatever. So okay, well, thank you for the suggestion. I appreciate it. But speaking of German, let's jump to Zen. Oh, some of you in the chat even might be Zen fans, right? I hear so many good things about Zen. We talked about Sushi pointing out, or excuse me, Tuna pointing out about ball watches having such a good reputation. Sushi just brought up Frederic Constant. So many people love Zen. So this is one I have on my list as a brand because I hear so many good things about it. But at the prices that they are, I have never been able to find one that I like enough for the money, even though I hear they're super robust. And I like the idea of super robust. Not all my collection needs to be super robust. Obviously, it's not. But is that idea, I like it. Now, these came out earlier this year. These were revealed just before Watches. Zen wasn't at Watches and Wonders, but they were at a kind of competing event called Time to Watches, which is a weirdly named thing. It's like, what does that mean? Time to Watches. And watches is plural in it. Anyway, we're not here to complain about that either. So I saw this one with this bezel. This is titanium watch, and then you've got this gold bronze bezel. And I just think it looks pretty cool. But again, like I don't like their 3 o'clock date window, and it zooms in too weird there. I was trying to see if we could get the date, but we'll just have to look at it on this photo. Oh, let me use my control button. There we go. Let you guys have a little bit bigger view. So 3 o'clock date windows. I'm not inherently against them. And hey, it's a color match date window, so it's okay. I actually have grown to prefer like having the Cyclops over it, like Rolex does when we do the 3 o'clock. It's like, if it's going to be there, you might as well highlight it. So the T50 series is something where it's like, I do like the look of it, but Zinn's been raising their price. In fact, they might be one of those companies that's been kind of doing like 2 price increases a year or so. I've been hearing I haven't followed it that closely. I've been hearing some other people note that. And I see Sushi has noted the U50 looks good to him, but the prices are climbing too much. And, you run into this barrier of you start thinking, well, what else could I get at this price point? And in his case, he cites Tudor. Now, for me, the U50s, and I had a live stream, my last live stream, in fact, where Patrick from Pocket Time Watches was on, and he really talked up the U series. For me, the U series is too extreme. I prefer the T series because I'll go ahead and show you some U's right here for those that aren't familiar with them. To me, the U's are a little too Lego in their hand and their indices set. It looks so blocky that for me, it's toy-like in a way that I don't appreciate, but a lot of people love these. And they definitely are more unique. Like the T series I was showing you all, that they're kind of boring, right? But I do tend to lean fairly boring when it comes to watches. Though normally with dive watches, that's kind of where I'm more creative. And by more creative, I mean I take someone else's creativity and wear it. And usually in that regard, I just mean in terms of colors. Like I'm more willing to have bright colors on a dive watch. So that's one. So Zen's one where I don't really have a specific model. I liked that T50 I showed you all, but it's just like, I hear so many good things about the brand. I kind of feel like I'm supposed to own one, but I never find one that I'm willing to just like gamble on it at the price that it's at. Even knowing I can sell it down the line, of course, it's still just like, perhaps I'm too risk adverse to try it, but that's one that I just haven't been able to get behind. So, let's stick with dive watch. Don't worry, these are not all dive watches. I've kind of front loaded some of the dive watches. In fact, pretty much all of them. But let's go ahead and let's talk Rado. Okay, so this is a Swatch Group brand. A lot of people really like Rado watches. This is a Captain Cook, and it's always been the Captain Cooks that have caught my eye the most. So as I take a swig of my Diet Coke here, Part of it is I like the dial configuration in general, like the broad arrow. I think that looks really good on dive watches. I like this. I don't know if all the numbers are in red, but in this instance, you know, the date window isn't color matched, but it matches with the loom of the indices. So I think it looks clean. I like the large Arabic numerals in the 15-minute marking spaces on the bezel. This is a ceramic version too, and that's kind of one of those places where Rado has really stood out. I've never had a ceramic watch. I've had ceramic bezel inserts, but never had a watch made out of ceramic. And that's probably where I don't pull the trigger on this. Is I'm super suspicious about whether or not I'm comfortable wearing a ceramic watch, because I scratch practically all my watches. That's a given, and I'm fine with that. I've dinged a number of watches, like dropping them and taking a little chunk out of them or whatever. And you know, you run into that question of, do you want to polish it or not? And that's fine. But let's say you choose to. You can choose to. It's your right. You could go and get it fixed. And in fact, you could even go and get it welded even. I mean, it's expensive, especially for like steel and stuff, but you can go and get the shape restored on a metal case. You can't with ceramic. It's like if the lug busts off, the lug's busted off, and you're gonna have to replace the whole case. And like, is that like a huge barrier? Probably, but I don't know for sure. But I really like these looks. I like how the ceramic looks on these watches. Again, this is a brand where I've heard a lot of people say Rado's really good, especially in the dive watch realm, very underappreciated. You know, a Swatch doesn't do a good job marketing them. And we can probably do a whole video about. It's come up on several live streams I've done about Swatch and how they market brands that aren't Omega. But so, you know, again, and 3600 for as nice and of a spec watch as this is, it's not unreasonable. I just with Rado, I just maybe if I could handle one. I don't know if like I didn't see Rado when I went to I may need to look more closely. I don't recall seeing Rado when I went to our area dealer that does Omega, but it might have been there. They had other, you know, I looked at like their Breitlings and stuff after that. So that was kind of the thing. And hey, Neff, welcome to the live stream. What is happening? If you're doing like a, hey, what's up? What's happening? Then I just say, hey. If you're asking like, what the heck are we talking about? It's Dennis is going through and naming brands that have caught my eye, but I have never pulled the trigger on. You know, new or used. These are watch brands I have never owned. We did ball watches. We did Sinn watches. And right now I was just talking about Captain Cook's line in Rado. And about ceramic watches, and where this has kind of been the brand that I've always been drawn to with the ceramic watch. Like at 3600, it's approachable enough. It's luxury, but it's not like going, you know, Gerard Perregaux levels for ceramic, which, you know, for a first ceramic watch, I'd probably be too scared to spend that much, quite bluntly. But I just still can't, because I'm worried about ceramic and whether my destructive lifestyle of swinging my arm around like a loon is going to damage the watch, that even at 3600 I'm terrified to get one. So, you know, one of those things that I've just never been able to pull the trigger on, but I think I want to. You know, it's one of those weird watch collector things. So that's what's happening. Koji says he's not into dive watches whatsoever, but Captain Cook is a very aesthetically pleasing design to his eye. And Tuna says the Cook is a beautiful diver that comes in a smaller size. This is the 43 millimeter I was showing, by the way. So, and he likes the Diastar. And actually, Koji, that's a really good point about dive watches. So I obviously I disagree. I do like dive watches, so I'm not into them whatsoever. But I don't have a collection that's ever been dominated by dive watches. And I currently own 4. I'm wearing one of them right now. And so that's another issue that I didn't really raise because it's not as big of a deal as like, are we paying over $3,000 to take a chance on an experimental material that, you know, with my clumsiness, I'm going to destroy? There's also the fact that I don't really want more than 4 dive watches. Now, I could always like sell this Orient or like sell my Seiko or some, you know, or whatever, and get out of one of the dive watches. But because currently, no, maybe do I have 4 or am I down to 3? I guess. How would you all know? It's like what I have. I have a Seiko Turtle. I have this Orient Cano. I have an Omega 300M, and I'm trying. Maybe I am down to 3 because I got rid of my Tudor Black Bay Bronze. I guess I could go back up to 4. That was okay. I can do it. I don't want to go past 4, guys. We got to have some limits, right? I don't want to be one of them dive watch people. And see, Sushi likes dive watches because he's rough with it. And see, with all the other materials, even with bronze would show a scratch pretty easily because the patina would get scratched. But I still really like that watch. It was just I had to use third-party straps with it because it came on the leather strap, and I didn't like that. I don't really like leather for divers as a general rule, at least not Tudors. And anyway, I needed that money for another watch, so that's really the reason it had to go. Neff noted that he had a ceramic Rado that broke 15 minutes. Holy cow. After I got it, I was reattaching the bracelet and the case shattered. Been out in freezing weather, so I assume that's what happened. He wasn't rough with it. Yeah, wow. Okay, well, you know what? Maybe my recalcitrance is warranted in this case, and we'll take Rado off the list. No, I'll probably always still have it in my mind as something. I don't know. Do anyone, and feel free in the chat or on the comment section if you're watching the recording. Do you have like a ceramic brand that you recommend someone try, like something not more than that Rado, so under 3,600? Because like that's the thing, right? It's the price point for the material. I don't want to go into super expensive for a weird material like that. So, and Koji is noted he appreciates dive watches and got to handle the Omega Ultra Deep and thought that was quite amazing. But I do have more dive watches. I have at least one. I'm looking at my list. Okay. I've got, how many more do I have? I have 2 more dive watches, but we're going to take a break from them. Okay. Let's do a pilot's watch, right? I don't talk a lot about pilot's watches, but okay. So Breitling. I've never owned a Breitling. Now I've gone and looked at Breitling, so I have more like hands-on experience. I'm trying to remember if I had them. I didn't have them pull this one out of the case, but I remember them being our area Omega AD is also the Breitling AD. So this is a Navitimer. Now the Navitimer, when I first saw the Navitimers, I always thought they look really, really busy, and I haven't been as much into like Breitling's what are they? Super Oceans dive watches. It's always been more the pilot. Like I know them for pilot watches. And then they came out with these Navitimers that aren't the chronographs. And I thought, without the subdials, they're busy because they still have the slide roll, but they're a lot cleaner. And I started to look at them a lot more. And they come in a variety of colors, most of which I like. You've got a decently placed date window. You've still got the beaded bezel to turn the nav time. I mean, it's got the splashes of red with in this instance, you see, it's like really well balanced. I really like the balance on this watch. Couple of things on it. One, all right. Now, I've seen these like on Joma and stuff, so we can get it under 5,400, but just be aware the starting price point retail on these is pretty high. And I'm not a big movement critic about using Ebosh movements, but the Navitimers they're relying like on ETA stuff. So it's not got movement tech that there's R&D that this is covering, right? So that's one thing, but okay. Since we can find a discount, that's okay. We can get them somewhere under 4,000. The other thing, and I just need to research this, is so I don't really know how to use the slide rule. Let me rephrase that. I said I don't really know how to use the slide rule. I was implying like I didn't know how to use it on the watch. I don't know how to use a slide rule. Okay, I'm old, but I wasn't old enough to learn how to use those. I've seen guides on how to use it. The thing is, I'm not entirely sure yet if the slide rule works as it is without the chronograph function, or if the chronographs that were originally with this watch style were necessary to fully do it. I mean, it probably opened up your options on doing stuff, but I'm just curious, like, is the slide rule just an aesthetic choice at this point, or is this still like a practical calculation you do without the chrono? If it's practical without the chronograph, this stays on the interested list. If it's just aesthetic and you actually couldn't functionally use it, I don't know. It's a bridge too far for me. I'm like, no, I don't want a fake slide rule that has no practical bearing. And yes, I'm acknowledging that I don't even know how to use it, but I only want it to be there if it makes sense. Otherwise, we might as well look at a chronomat or something instead. But I do like the aesthetics on this a lot. It's a super attractive watch. I just think they ask for an awful lot of money for even this fairly simple version. I mean, you had several $1,000s if you want the chronograph iterations, but these new versions of these Navitimers, I think, are stunning. All sorts of. There's got some that are like gold bezeled and stuff. They like all look good. They have a green one that even looks good. I say that as if I don't like green, and I do. In fact, we're going to have a green watch as one of my examples later on. See, Tuna says the Breitling looks pretty. Neff says hard to go wrong with a Navitimer, and he really likes that one, as did Koji. And I'm glad to see that Neff only lost about $500 over that Rado, but it's that's a weird thing, especially if it's temperature sensitive. We get some pretty cold winters here, so I'd be too scared. So yeah, I don't want to lose $500 over temperature. That would make me very sad, a sad panda, as we used to say in the panda world. I never actually worked with pandas. Speaking of pandas, let's jump to the next company, which has nothing to do with pandas. It's Ulysse Nardin. Okay. Now I'm going to show you a diver, actually. I love this. This is called Diver, right? So Ulysse Nardin, what they used to be as a Coing group, which controlled them and Gerard Perregaux. Ulysse is on their own, or UN as they're commonly called. UN's on their own now. And what does everyone think of when you hear about UN? You think of the Freak, right? And the Freak is a really interesting watch. I don't know if it'd be a watch I would want to wear. Maybe if I could, let's not rule that one out. But the Freak's also a lot more money. So I've never seriously looked at Freaks because it's too avant-garde at the price. Like, I don't have that kind of money for avant-garde stuff. So like weird stuff I'd only wear sometimes. It's too niche. If it was a sub $10,000 watch, maybe. They generally are more than that. So in the case of this, though, I mean, they have the little anchor. They have the little anchor here on their logo for a reason, and that's because it's Ulysse Nardin was known. They have Maritimer watches and they have these dive watches, and it's a very basic sort of watch. This one is not. I just want to give you an example watch because this is one where I've heard a lot about the brand. And a lot of people really respect the brand. So much like Zen, I'm not really showing you the watch as the watch. I'm showing you UN as it's a company that people have repeatedly brought up and said, hey, this is a really cool brand. And I read about it, and I read about the history, and I read about the ideas behind it and some of the stuff that they've done. And again, most of the attention that they've captured has been around the Freak in particular, because when it came out, it was a pretty big, it was a kind of a seismic, what was I going to say? I was going to say seismic shockwave or sonic boom to the industry, right? Not a bunch of Freak clones came out after it. It was so different that it impressed a lot of people. So UN's been on the radar as a brand, but again, if I'm rolling the Freak out, I end up looking at some of the stuff like the UN Diver I just showed, which has an MSRP of $7,700. I'm sure that's cheaper used because they're not usually when I hear people take a breath and then tell you all the brands they could possibly say really, really fast before they run out of air that are really luxury dive watches. UN is not one of them in that breath, right? You'll hear Omega before that, obviously Rolex before, stuff like that. And I've got other, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I've got another luxury dive watch that I have in the list that I would rather have than UN's dive watch. So again, it's a brand that keeps catching my eye, and I never can quite get there. So that's the struggle. And yes, that's a good point, Tuna. They should know, since Switzerland gets cold as well. But maybe that case isn't made in Switzerland, right? Oh, we get in that weird Swiss-made space. Oh, they don't want us to talk about that. Mosier would love us to talk about that because they love to criticize how little Swiss-made means for most of the other brands. Mosier is actually not on my list. I should note, this list is not comprehensive. I have looked at Mosier's and never pulled the trigger. Before I move to the next one, I guess I'll throw out some just spoilers of brands. None of the Holy Trinity are in the list, even though I've looked at watches on all of them, of course. So no Audemars Piguet, no Vacheron, no Patek. I did not put Chopard, which I've looked at recently. I did not put Chopard in the list. Actually, their website's down right now. That's why they're not in the list, because I actually tried to load them up. Because I thought with all this Christopher Ward 12 stuff that it might be time to have a conversation a little bit about the Antarctique, because it's a pretty attractive watch. And I guess if I were to summarize what my reason for not going for it is, it's super expensive. So So that's one of those. A lot of these are going to start to be price point barriers, which isn't particularly surprising. That's part of the reason I left out the Holy Trinity, because that was going to be the excuse for all of it, right? I mean, $30,000 for a Calatrava. I mean, you're just like, the price is going to be a barrier for people. Like, what's the barrier to the like most attractive a Calatrava-esque watch, which would be the Calatrava, the price. So it's those sort of things. I see Sushi has asked a question in the chat. Have you ever owned or seen a porcelain dial? Not in person. Not in person. I think in fact, I have looked at some videos where people have explained the porcelain firing process for some dials, but I've never handled one. So obviously I've never owned it either. Speaking of another brand, though, that I have never owned, and I've talked about it a lot on this channel, Zenith. Okay, so Zenith has a lot of interesting watches, and I've started to look more at the Defy line, but I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the Chronomasters. So there are two in my list. I got two of the tabs up here. So very, very similar. There's Chronomaster Sport, which is probably the more popular watch overall. And then there's a Chronomaster Original. The Chronomaster Original is a 38 millimeter watch, whereas the Chronomaster Sport is a 41 millimeter with the external bezel versus this internal bezel or internal markings, because the bezel's the bezel. But this one, so the Original, I actually had this. Purchased at one point, and so sort of. I have to qualify. Sort of. So and both of these are the ones with the new movement, the 3600 movement that has the central seconds hand that whips around the dial once every 10 seconds. So Joma Shop, often they've generally been the cheapest. Like, I've even contacted or looked at used ones on used dealers like Watch You Seek or whatever places, and they're not trading for under what Joma Shop is. In fact, I talked to a used dealer at one point, and I could not get them down to the gray market price for a used one. I got them like within $50, but I couldn't get them any lower. I couldn't even get them to match. So given that, I've always looked kind of there, and these have been, and last I looked last week, these are once again one of those, they list it as 1 to 2 week wait. They have to get it. Like, they don't have any in stock at Joma. I actually added one though and did the purchase online, and then I called them the next day to find out if they could give a time estimate. They couldn't. I waited one more day, and then I decided I was going to go in a different direction, and I canceled the order. Now, I don't know if it was because I put it in my shopping cart for 2 days, but in the next week, they then got supply of this, and it took them a couple of months to sell this model out. So why did I back out of the Original? It wasn't the price point. I was okay with the price, which, again, gray market. It was closer to mid sevens, not 10,000. The issue was twofold. One, the size. I know I'm good with 38 millimeter watches. I don't know if I'm good with 38 millimeter chronographs. I've only owned 2 chronographs in my lifetime. I had a Citizen one, which maybe I have it here somewhere. Maybe it was, I had a burglary in 2019. Maybe it was stolen. I hadn't worn it in years. This is before I was collecting. So once I got my Rolex Explorer 2, I quit wearing the Citizen. So it was sitting somewhere with a dead battery. And but I'd had that watch from the 90s. And then I had a Hamilton, one of their khaki pilot watches, which I didn't like. But both of those were large and easy to read the dials. And so my concern is with the subdials and the indicators to actually use when I wore my Citizen, I actually used the chronograph to time, like if I need to do quote unquote billable hours on something, I used the chronograph. It was really convenient for that. So anyway, so my point is, it's not just to look cool with the subdials. I need the chronograph to be workable. Like, I need it functional for me, because I'll probably go back to using it to time stuff. So I was a little concerned about that, but I was willing to take the chance. But then I read online when I was doing more research on it, of course, after I quote unquote placed the order, that there were some people reporting a lot. No, I shouldn't say a lot, but there were a number of issues reported with the movements, the 3600 movements, that purportedly were resolved on newer versions. But when the movement first came out, I had kind of those flashbacks to all the stories about when Tudor first did their in-house movements and the date window didn't work right. And this was like chronograph reset stuff. And when I owned my Hamilton Pilot, it went in for service twice for chronograph timing issues. The minutes hand would not reset properly. I sent it in. It was fixed under warranty, came back that same day, the same exact, it even failed to reset to the same exact spot. I was furious. It was 2 months for both of those services, and I got rid of the watch after I got it back. And it seemed fixed after the second one, but by then I didn't really love wearing it, and I was so poisoned against the watch at that point. I just couldn't bring myself to keep it. So I get it, watches break, but had it only needed the one service, I think I'd have been cool with it. But it going right back in, I was absolutely livid. So that was that. So because of that, I've looked at doing this one instead because it's larger and it's going to solve, and that doesn't solve the concerns about the movement, but it would solve the concerns about the legibility because I know this size will be fine for me. And yeah, it's about $1,000 to the price point, but it looks so much like a dang Daytona that I don't, and that's fine, but I don't want it to look like, oh, you bought it because you couldn't get, like, I want the Zenith because of what that watch is. I don't want to send the impression that I got it because I couldn't get a Daytona. And normally I would say I don't really care what people think about. I mean, I buy the watches that I like to wear, but I've never run into it either where I've been like, this watch looks an awful lot like some super popular watch. Like I've never gotten one like that. So it's just like no one confuses the Orient Cano with some sort of Omega Aquaterra. So it's just one of those things. But so that's kind of where I stand with that. So again, I've just never pulled the trigger on any of the Zeniths. Let's see. Tuna said, I thought that Seiko were offering some porcelain dial models. I think you are correct. And maybe I covered one of those in a First Thoughts video. One of the Presage line watches, I think we're doing porcelain. There are a few other brands that are like quote unquote affordable doing porcelain. I just don't remember them because again, I've seen some other people do videos and they talk about like how many of the dials crack in the baking process. I have to throw them out. So there, there's an added price delta between that and a regular dial watch because of, even though everything else about the watch is the same, just to deal with those losses. Now, Neff does bring up a good point. Get a Navitimer and kill two birds. And I have thought about that more and more. The main issue has been the busyness of the Navitimer. That being said, when I do think chronographs, Neff, I think Zenith and I think Breitling. So like I have no interest in a moon watch. And while I like some of the racing Omegas better, it's better looking like aesthetically. Like when I hear people talk about Omega, I never hear them talk about like how awesome the chronograph feature is. Whereas you do hear that about the tech in Breitlings and Zenith. So that is an angle that I may be 316 my brain around to going, because that example dial that many of you liked here in the chat, they have that exact color scheme in the chronograph. Like all the colors are also in the chronograph version. So you have a lot of, you can get them both ways. So again, yeah, that might be the angle that I end up doing. And Breitling still seems to kind of flood the market. So you can find the Breitlings gray a little bit easier, I'd say, than the Zeniths. Zeniths used to have a flood market problem. And then when the pandemic hit, everyone was buying up all those Chronomaster Sports in particular. So they've been able to hold the pricing a lot tighter than they did on some of their older models. Zenith also has some stuff. I do like the 10th of a second thing because I kind of like their smoke dial, like throwback 69 style cases that they were doing with the ladder bracelets, though I hear the ladder bracelets weren't comfortable. So again, another reason why things get ruled out. Let's go ahead and do the last dive watch on my list. So I've been coming closer on this one. This is one that I've been thinking about probably for half a year at least now. And that would be Blancpain. So the 50 Fathoms, of course, is our most famous watch line. I've looked at a number of their watch collections, and I do favor the 50 Fathoms over everything else. I don't like the main 50 Fathoms as much, though. It's way too big. It's fine. I get wearing a big dive watch, so like intellectually, I could get behind it, but I do prefer. Bear in mind, this is still big. This is like a 43 millimeter watch still. Yeah, 43. So this is the Bathyscap, which is actually somewhat controversial aesthetically for a lot of people. I think because of the 430 date window. I know some people also don't really care for the indices because these are kind of like in a Rolex style. They'll do like a white gold indice and then they fill them with lume. And they're kind of small, but I like the shape. I love sunbrushed. Again, longtime followers of the channel know I've owned a number of sunbrushed dials because I love sunbrushed dials. So I like this look. They have this in blue also. And maybe I should get, if I were to do it, maybe I should get blue, because what color am I showing you? Gray, which is like the color that Dennis always buys, is gray. So maybe we don't do gray, but maybe we do, because I love gray. It's my favorite color. So anyway, I just, it's different. It's, again, when it comes to luxury, like if I was to get another luxury dive watch, it's basically between this and the Rolex Submariner No Date. Now, Rolex isn't in this list because I've owned Rolex, so I can't include them in this video topic. This would be a little more off the beaten path. This watch retails for more than the Rolex. Even the Rolex Date's cheaper than this at retail. But you can get these gray less than the Rolex retail prices are. Like this trades for between 7,000 and 8,000 gray. This version does. So you can get them, used, get them gray at a discount. Display case back. There's some aspects to this. Really long power reserves. They're not really, there are a few versions that have come on bracelets. Finding these on bracelets is not, most of these come on like these sailcloth or rubber straps. And it's been like, it's been one of those things that it's like, yeah, I kind of would want a bracelet. That's probably been one of the biggest drawbacks to it. And I've not handled one in person. So it's one of those I keep thinking about. I see Neff has noted the whole, seeing them like 4,500 or so a few years ago, and now they're 8 to 10. Yeah, it's gone up a lot, I think, as difficulty in getting Submariners has gone on. I think people have started to look at, or like if they're after a luxury dive watch and they're not hung up about it having to say Rolex, or their heart isn't set on the specific look of the Rolex Sub, which it's an iconic look, far more iconic than the Bathyscap. So I could definitely see where one would be like, it's got to be the Rolex Sub. Absolutely. I totally understand. But I think that's driven up some of these other ones that maybe are even better built, but so that's probably part of it. And then some of the older ones, I still see some of the older ones. You can find older versions of the Bathyscap for less. Again, they'll be used, so that's part of it. Also, they made some major movement upgrades. So like, I think they've doubled their power reserve over the last 10 years. So there's some of that going on as well. And then there's sizing issues, because they do have Bathyscaps that are 38 millimeters, and those are unsurprisingly trade for less than the 43s. A lot of those, actually, if not all of them, are closed caseback though. And again, these are like display caseback with 300 meters water resistance. Very, very, very attractive. But again, it's just one of those things. But I already have a few dive watches, so it's not been this huge priority. And the pricing's pretty decent. And it doesn't look like a sub. But the thing is, if I was to go and get another Rolex, it would be a No Date sub, because I really like the look of the note. And again, I'm cool with other people liking the look too. They're just difficult to get. But it would be the one that I would most likely be interested in. I'll have to take a look at the Blancpain Fleurier. I'm probably not saying it right, Fleurier, but yeah, I've looked a little bit at some of them. Actually, I could probably try and, I already closed the window, so I'll just see if I can find it while I'm talking to you. But I've looked at some of their other collection. I probably didn't look at the Fleurier though, because their example one they show on their website is in the tab is the same one you see right here, which is a super complicated dial watch. And I would see something like this and I'd go, oh, okay, this is probably 6 figures, so let's not look at it, sort of thing. But so are you thinking like something like the Quatreme, the weird shaped hand? That's always sort of alienated me, though I do like the moon phase. Look at him. He's all like creepy. He's like eyeballing us. Oh, sunbrush. You know me. I like those sunbrush, sunray, sunburst style dials, but very interesting. Well, speaking of interesting, let's go ahead and jump to a GMT watch. Now I have one GMT watch. I've only ever owned one GMT watch. I have a 16570 Explorer 2 Rolex. And I don't travel to different time zones very much. So that's the one I wear when I travel. So I've always done that. but there is a brand, and I'm going to show you the GMT, though I'm not hung up on the GMT one in particular, and that is Parmigiani Fleurier. Okay. So this is a relatively newer brand. This is not a long-term named storied brand. They've been around for a couple decades, though. Their recent Tonda line, the Tondas have been around for a long time, but they've revamped the collection lately. They had a couple new ones this year. This is from last year that I'm showing you on the screen. Super cool, simple, but super cool idea. So on this one with the GMT, it's a two-hander watch most of the time. This rose gold GMT hand hides under the hour hand. There's a button here, and then you can push it and you can cycle it out from under the hour hand to show you the other time zone. And that's how the GMT function works. Super clean dial. It's got this sort of Antarctique-esque texturing, but it maybe looks more like the Antarctique than it does a Royal Oak, but it's textured, but it doesn't look like anything else. I like their new simplified logo they're doing on the watches for the Parmigiani. Not like they look at some of the old ones. That's not as attractive. They're still nice watches. But they're then the reason for this is it's empty, but it's well done. It's balanced. It's well balanced. And that's where as Neff has noted, Blancpain and Parmigiani do empty dial space so well. And it's not right. It's not one of the things I heard another person, so I'll steal from them. I don't remember who it was, who complained about Christopher Ward. I think I was watching one of the casual watch time live streams. They said it's like they feel like they have to do more of everything. So they just stick stuff in all over the place. And sometimes less is more. And this is one of those instances. Incidentally, I thought this was the button, but there's also a little gold thing here. Maybe I don't know where the button is. Let me put it that way. They have a two-hander that's just like this without the GMT. And I like that too, except even then, you're still about 20,000 Swiss francs, which is a little more in dollars. And it's like, it's so much. It's so much. Let's go ahead and I'll show you some. So they got some of these with two-handers with dates, which it's well done. But no sushi, no running seconds. And with a mechanical watch, I'm going to say, I don't mean to be a snob, but this is going to be kind of snobbish. I want to show off that it's a mechanical movement. I want a running seconds because that's what tells you, right? If you're going to do two-handers, it might as well be quartz. You can hide that fact. In fact, that's part of the reason I like some of the Cartier quartz watches. It's like they know when they do the quartz ones, they're like, let's just do two-handers. No one can tell the difference that way. And they're right. Absolutely right. So again, it's an attractive watch, 22,000. Let's, dollars are a little bit more last I looked in Swiss francs, but it's about the same. So $22,000 watch. And then they've got some that don't have the date either and don't have the GMT hand like this, which again, I love gray, but it's basically $20,000. So there's so much. And that's why I haven't been able to pull the trigger. These are not gray. These are not used. They're just too new. The older versions of the Tondas can be readily found. Most of the Tondas that are in this configuration I've been showing you, that basic case shape, like the integrated watch style, which I really like their integrated watch look that they're doing here. I think it feels unlike anything else. They're generally in like that $12,000 to $15,000 range for the old models, which just don't look as good either. So that's kind of the thing. Catch up on chat here real quick. So Sushi said, I bought a Breitling Super Ocean Heritage in November, but regret it. It's gorgeous, but in hindsight, a blingy diver doesn't dress down at all. Might trade it for a Breitling chrono. Yeah, some people love those Super Oceans. It's not a style that's ever really, really called to me, but Breitling does love, especially in the older days, they love bling. I do like some of the choices they made with the new Super Ocean. It was interesting to learn. It was Design Atelier Jason with them explain why they have that stubby hand, because it's a callback to something else, but that hand had a different purpose back then. So there's some stuff that they've done where visually it calls to something, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. So Breitling, I don't think, has fully found its footing yet in the new Breitling, but I feel like they're doing a lot better than they used to be. So I think they're making the right moves overall. But let's see. Tuna says Parmigiani, excellent quality, or so they say. Again, I haven't handled one of these. There are no dealers remotely near me in Kansas City with Parmigiani. I think the closest place is Chicago. if I remember correctly. Koji says new Tonda is really impressive. Getting a Ratapante at that price is quite amazing. And that's where it's like, I could live without the Ratapante. So let's do, I kind of wish, could it have running seconds? And then even if it did, could I go to $20,000 for a Steel sports watch? I don't know, guys. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for Steel. I'm one of those people. It's tough for me with Steel. So, if you were going around and you were looking at Royal Oaks all the time in Nautilus, I could definitely see where you'd be like, you know what, this is a great price for what it is. But it's a really good look for integrated. And I've only ever owned one integrated. I had a Quartz Tissot PRX. Were a little big for me, but otherwise I enjoyed the watch. But I got rid of it to, free up funds and make, not that I got very much money back out of the Quartz version, but I wasn't wearing it enough. So I moved it on for new things. So moving on, I'm going to jump to the last brand. We're going to start with another integrated. This one's one that we talked about a bit in the post Watches and Wonders because they made some new. I'm going to show you an older one initially. This is Chopard. And Koji asked me about what size of the PRX. It was the big one. It was the 41. The 38 or 34s came out like that month when I ordered the one I got. So on retrospect, that one the smaller one definitely would have felt a lot better. And Tuna had noted he quite likes two-handed watches. I like the aesthetic doesn't bug me. But generally it depends on the watch. Like Parmigiani, like I could see myself getting it, but I'd so much rather see like maybe a small seconds on there. In that case, their dial's so clean. I honestly want the central seconds, but I could probably get past it. What I couldn't get past, I mean, let's be fair. Let me be fair. Let me be clear. If they added a central seconds on it, I'd still struggle at 19,500. So it's a lot. It's a lot for Steel for me. It's too much for me at this point. Maybe my brain will warp enough eventually that I'll be like, you know what? Enough people have joined the Watches with Dennis's club at 99 cents a month, Dennis. You can go ahead and notice my convenient plug there. You can go ahead now and you can go and you can get that Parmigiani that you always wanted, but we're not to that point yet. So let's talk Chopard. Much more approachable, still expensive Steel, much more approachable. Now, I really like the new one they have. I'll show you I didn't put it up in a tab, but I'll show you the new one. This is one of the, I like green. So I wanted to show just a weird one, but so, the eagle eye texturing on these Chopards, I really enjoy it. And I think it's different. Color match date window. I'm okay with 430 date windows, so this doesn't bug me. Actually, I like how sporty this looks, even though it has Roman numerals, which, generally speaking, kind of dressy up a watch. I can see where some people would go, the screws on the bezel feel like Royal Oak isms, even though the bezel's round. And I don't think we could say anything other than the crown guards and the corresponding rectangles on the other side are clearly derived, in my view, from the Nautilus. But the mashup in and of itself, when I look at it, even from a distance, I don't think this is a Royal Oak or think this is a Nautilus. I think it's definitely stolen ideas from both, but has executed its own thing and then stands out because of what they went with on the dial. So overall, I think it's a very attractive watch, and I think it's become its own thing whilst still clearly, I think you have to look at it and go, they definitely borrowed ideas from AP and Patek, but they didn't make an homage. So in that regard, I think they did it different enough that stands on its own, but you're never going to think that they were like full of originality. Now, if you haven't seen the new one that they came out with, it's super cool. And this is the one that they revealed at Watches and Wonders. So if I can find it. They got so many of these. I like this one a lot too. It's a lot more money. It's about $8,000 more. But they made the move from the central seconds to the small seconds at the 6 o'clock. And I really like this color a lot too. Actually, I probably like this color more than the green. I've never owned a salmon dial watch, but this one, because of its texturing, I really, really like. I do like I'm not going to be the first, don't be on your mailing list. So just, I like this one more. No date also. So if you have a problem with the 430 dates, I'm hoping we'll see more like this and some other colors and stuff. I just think that this is a good route to go, that it's going to really appeal to people. Both of these use their Lucent steel. which is harder than, it's not like super duper ultra hard. I've heard it compared to that. What is it? Is it Diashock that Seiko does on some of their? I think it's supposed to be like that additional Vicar hardness, if I remember a Tim Masso thing on it correctly, which whether or not I do remains to be seen. In terms of chat, Scotty asks, do you dislike the seconds hand on a spring drive? No, I do not. I like the second hand. In fact, my favorite thing about because the seconds hand is a way that you can tell a watch is mechanical on a spring drive, because you get that perfectly smooth sweep. That's like the best thing about the spring drive. Especially if I used to own a Grand Seiko, and mine was closed case back, so you couldn't look at the spring drive running. So the seconds hand was the way you knew it was spring drive. Just that perfectly smooth streak is super cool. Just especially if you've ever handled and looked at a lot of mechanical watches at different beats per minute. Like if you've looked at like 2.5 hertz up to 5 hertz and seen that, and still seen that stutter, and then you see spring drive, it's just like, wow, it's my favorite thing about it. And the power reserves, even on the old spring drives, are really cool. They're like 72-hour power reserves, really nice power reserves. Granted, most of them are automatic, so you don't really need that much power reserve, but nonetheless, it's still neat. Tuna notes, or excuse me, sushi. Yeah, I've got tuna, I've got sushi, and it's getting very confusing, and it's making me hungry, even though I'm not a big sushi fan. Alpine Eagle 2 is gorgeous. Or you meant the 41, which yes, it definitely is. Chef's kiss to the salmon dial, I concur. Sushi could never do the green dial. It's hard to match with what I wear. This green in particular might be a bit much because it's a forest green. Because now, like professionally, or even now, you see, I'm wearing a Stern Pinball gray shirt. I wear a lot of blues and grays, and green. I had to look this up because I don't know. I'm not a designer. I'm not colorblind, but I'm not. One would not trust me to like dress them properly. I'm not to imply that I'm a child, but color coordination is not my strong suit. So what I've done like for work and stuff is I would go and like load a color wheel or some sort of like this, like here's what I have people tell me what to do. Basically, I have the internet's professionals tell me what to be like. What goes with gray suits? Green does. And I have 2 gray suits, and I have a pinstripe blue suit. What goes with navy blue suits? Green does. So green dials actually work really well with the colors I usually wear, that I wear because I know they work, because I looked it up. So I know how to dress myself. So, but again, this is a sporty watch, right? So with this, would I want to wear, and this is a pretty deep green. So I think it goes with more stuff than like the Oris Kermit does. The Kermit green is pretty bright, but this, with the texturing, it makes me a little unsure, but I had a really deep green Rolex Oyster Perpetual, and it looked good with lots of stuff, or so the internet color wheels told me. So, and that's what I trust. So, but I didn't want to just talk about these, though. I see Koji has noted pre-owned Chopard LUC still represents. I'm assuming that's called LUC, not luck, but maybe it's luck. It's kind of fun to say. We'll say LUC. Still represents amazing value. You can get a nice precious metal dress watch, usually automatic though, with Geneva seal for under 10K. And I do want to talk about a Chopard LUC, but I want to talk about one of the steel ones. This is the other thing. It's not just the Alpine Eagles. One of the viewers on this channel, they have an Alpine Eagle. I think it's one of the club members, and they really liked it a lot. And so they sent me some photos, like emailed them to me privately so I could get a good look at them, because I've never handled one. But then there was this that also came out at Watches and Wonders. This is 36.5 millimeters, by the way. And this is not precious. It's $23,000, but it's steel. It's lucent steel again. But holy crap, does this not look sexy? This is, we talked about this Eagle with the subdial, which looks great in the salmon. But then you look at this, salmon again, but with these applied indices, this like guillotine in the center of the dial, and then additional circular guillotine, different pattern to the interior of the small seconds within the smooth sunburst. We got sunburst, me and sunburst, all of that going on here with this watch. We got the micro rotor, all of that, Geneva seal. Kind of see it with my mouse here. This is an incredibly attractive watch. Now, this is the brand new one, so you're not going to find this gray, and you're not going to find it for under 10K. But there are other LUC. Okay, I guess it's either dots here. So I guess there are other LUC watches that come in at much lower price points, including steel ones that retail under 10. But this new one in particular, I just think looks so good that, again, it's why Chopard's on the list of brand. I've not pulled the trigger on it, but I hadn't even really looked at Chopard very much until this year. And then I knew about the Alpine Eagles, so I'd looked at those. I hadn't looked at their other stuff. After seeing this, I started to look at other LUCs though, and it's like, wow, they were not on my radar for dress style watches. And so it's really good. I really like it. So Neff says he loves the 1860. I haven't met anyone yet who hates the 1860. Plenty of probably wouldn't buy it, but Koji says it's gorgeous. Now, like, why, for me, why not the 1860? And there are two reasons. One, obviously at that price point, again, it's steel. Would I want to look instead kind of what Koji had noted earlier, look more at a secondhand precious metal one instead? Maybe Koji noting he'd probably take that over the Patek 6119. And yeah, DeJarsa said, yeah, making 10. Yeah, I do believe they do. There's a cap on the annual production even. So I think it might be 10 for future years as well, but I'm not positive of that. And welcome to the live stream, DeRosa. Glad you can make it. Yeah, the over, which one is, I don't know Patek reference number, so I'm going to look up the 6119 Koji, because I'm assuming that's one of the Calatravas. I just don't remember. And yes, let's go ahead and so folks can see it. We got to say yes to these cookies, guys. That's okay. Yeah, and actually I did use one of these versions of the 16119, which as a Calatrava style watch, the original Calatrava is generally the one I would go with over like Vacheron's version, or even the Saxonia. Like I prefer the Longa one over the Saxonia out of Longa. But this, just the texturing on the dial, like this gives me Breguet vibes, but without being like Breguet. Breguet is, so much of the stuff is like, I thought about putting Breguet on this list because I've never owned a Breguet, but there's design language is too old school for me. Okay. So it's too pocket watch-esque. Like they're not modern. Now their marine line is why I almost added them, but the marine I most like is a discontinued one. So they're kind of marine style watches I've enjoyed, but like their tradition and classique, there's always something about them that's a little too old world, too 19th century France. I just can't get behind them. So Calatrava, this Bauhaus-esque, I've heard it described. It's not like pure Bauhaus movement, but it's very simple, very clean, very nice. I really do like the 6119 from Patek, but this texturing just adds a little bit more visual interest. And from a distance, no one's going to be overly just like I agree. I guess that's what I'm saying is with Koji. I'm with Koji. Like if I was to pick between, like if I could get this 1860 or I could get, and it's cheaper. Granted, this is steel, not gold, but this is about $7,000 retail cheaper than a Patek. So I would agree. I would probably go. I'd say if I didn't already own a dress watch, that would be the way I would go. And so that's sort of the other thing. And there's no need to apologize. I didn't spontaneously decide to do this live stream, but I only made the notice for the live stream like at 8 o'clock my time for a 10 o'clock my time launch. And come on. I don't have any consistent schedule. I do weird. This is a hobby channel. I do weird things when I want. This is probably a good way to describe it, Koji. Baroque. Yeah, too Baroque. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of Baroque classically, and I'm not all that into the watch designs. And Neff notes he likes Breguet a lot, loves Breguet, in fact, but would prefer integrated lugs. But so that's the other thing with the 1860 with Chopard. So setting aside the price point, I don't really need more dress watches. I'm trying not to get more dress watches. My Longa one is still, I don't have it back from repair. So that's already a pretty high end price wise watch. And I have a Reverso. And while I do, especially like January through March, wear suits somewhat regularly because of what I do professionally, I don't usually wear the Reverso outside of those scenarios. And honestly, the Longa is probably going to be in the same boat. So it's like, and I really do love the Longa dial. So, though I got to admit the Chopard dial, this 1860 definitely gives it a run for its money. So now, could I envision selling my Reverso and then getting an 1860 and then saying, you know what, Dennis, you stayed to 2 dress watches, so it's okay. Definitely a conversation I could have with myself, but we're not to that point yet. We're not to that point. Thanks for tuning in, Neff. Appreciate it. We're actually almost done, so I'm glad you were able to make it live. And DeRosa, no, there's a Vacheron Traditional 38 millimeters in a boutique edition with a guilloche dial. I have not seen that. I have. That's interesting. So I mostly when I've thought of Calatrava styles, DeRosa, I've always looked at like the Patrimonies, but they're so big. Like if I had like an 8-inch wrist, I could see looking at Vacheron Patrimonies if I wanted a Calatrava style. I'm just throwing that out there for folks. So if you have a bigger wrist and you've thought most of these things like Saxonias and 1860s, which are 36.5 millimeter, and Calatravas are too small, take a look at the Patrimonies because I think you'll be pretty pleased with what you see. Koji says, if you have a longer one and a Reverso is all you need. Well, I'm trying to tell myself that that's true and don't do anything more. Yeah, I got rid of a lot of my collection for the Longa one. And unfortunately, it was not running in spec anymore. It's being serviced under warranty. So I'm just waiting for it to come back. But it's not back yet. So otherwise I'd have a review video out on it, but that was kind of a grail piece. So, and that's why the collection got reduced by 5 watches as to make room for that. Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Beautiful dial. And yeah, for me, for sure. I've worn, like I had one of the watches I got rid of to fund the Longa. I got rid of I had the IWC Portuguese before they went Portugueser, the big one, the 44 millimeter. I had the right mentality to wear it. I'll put it that way, but, big dress watch. And that's that style, right? That one, actually, my biggest complaint about it wasn't even the size, though. Overall, I'm happier having experimented with a variety of dress watches now with a smaller dress watch. It was actually hard to wind that thing. It was manual wind only, but because it uses a pocket watch movement, when you get towards the end of the wind, it actually was almost painful to. I usually like take a microfiber cloth, like I would use, or like I just keep this one here to clean my glasses in my watch. I just take this and I'd use it to grip the crown because it would cut into my hand so much. But so anyway, that's what I'm ending with. Those are all the brands that I wanted to point out in terms of ones that I've been thinking about getting and I've never pulled the trigger on. I had a pretty robust list at all sorts of price points. So anyway, those watching in the recording, you want to leave comments in terms of like brands you like that you've thought about that you've never pulled the trigger on, and you want to type up a little story as to why. Don't want to ask people to type too much on YouTube. It gets exhausting, but feel free to do so. I'm always interested in reading those comments. I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream here. Thanks everyone who was able to tune in for it live. I appreciate it. Chat was really robust. Loved all your thoughts. That's why I do it. It's a lot of fun. And don't know what my next video is going to be. I have a couple ideas for pre-recorded, but we'll do another live at some point, I'm sure. So anyway, everyone enjoy your weekend, and I'll talk to y'all on the next one.